Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It is Jason again, bringing you another Duel Masters historical deck profile. I do appreciate everybody voting in the poll and people commenting, so that I have a better idea of what kind of content you guys want to see. Now, because you guys, apparently want to see more of these historical deck profiles, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going through a Word document on my computer, which has a bunch of deck lists from tournaments past saved on it, and I'm going to be identifying the ones I think that are worth covering, uploading them to trade cards online, and then making videos for them. So they're going. I plan to do maybe like 10 or 12 of these, just because naturally, like, not every deck can be worthwhile. But yeah, so the plan at the moment is for me to release one of these once a month on top of the other content that I plan to put forward. So, without further ado, let's get into the deck list. This is the deck that won England Nationals in 2005, and it was played by Lamal Scarrett. I apologize for anyone who shares the same ethnic background as our friend if I butchered the pronunciation. So, Lamal played a 4-civ control-ish type of deck. He played Dark Water, Nature, and Dark Water, Nature, and Light, so no fire. So, creature section, pretty standard. He's got 3 Aqua Hulkus, play him, draw a card. Aqua Surfer, 6 mana, 2k, bounce creature, but he's mainly good because he's a shield trigger. He's got 4 Bronze Arms for that mana acceleration, 4 Corals for more bounce, so it's interesting that he plays 4 Corals and 2 Aqua Surfers. Personally, in my experience, in 3 Civ decks, I feel like you only have space for an Aqua Surfer line or a Corai line for water, but I guess this guy trimmed down on Aqua Surfer so that he could play both. He also played 1 Cryptic Totem, and I think this is the first time we are covering this card. So he's 6 mana, 6k, and while he's tapped, your opponent cannot use shield triggers. So that's a really powerful effect. Another way you can read this card is that once Cryptic Totem is tapped and you have enough creatures, you basically win the game because there's not a whole lot your opponent can do. The thing about Cryptic Totem is, well, a fun fact about him is that he actually was never released in the Japanese game. The Japanese original printing was called Curse Totem and didn't need to be tapped in order for the shield trigger blocking effect to come into play. So naturally, that card was completely broken, and I think it's banned in the OCG. But yeah, so we have Cryptic Totem. Even though he's nerfed, he's still pretty darn good. A bit curious that our friend here only played 1. And also an interesting thing to point out, this was obviously later in the year compared to our other Double Geyser deck profile, because we now have access to cards from Thunder Charge of Ultra Destruction. Okay, moving on, we have 4 Emerald Grass to start us off on the blockers, so similar to Hunterfish, same stats, 2 mana, 3k, but because he has Light Privilege, he can also attack other creatures. We've also got 2 Essence Elf, and Essence Elf is a super cool card in my opinion. Your spells each cost 1 less to cast, but they cannot cost less than 1 naturally. But yeah, Essence Elf pretty good, I think. I feel like if you are looking to pad out the nature section in decks, if it's either Essence Elf or Fairy Life that goes into them. Also, we have 4 Illusionary Merfolk, again a favorite of mine. I'm not even going to bother explaining the effect, you all know what it does by now. But it's quite curious because we have 4 Merfolks, but they're only supported by 4 Corals, so I think that's kind of weird. Emerald is noticeably missing in the lineup here. I guess this guy didn't really want to play it. I don't know. But okay, anyway, moving on. That threw me off a little bit. We've got 4 Locos when he hits the field, also a shield trigger. It's Ghost Touch. We've got 2 Propeller Mutant, so this is a throwback to my previous video on smoothing out the mana curve. When this creature dies, your opponent discards a card at random from his hand, so I think he's just there for the early game pressure. And last but not least, for the creature section, we have 3 Thrash Crawlers. This guy is a big favorite of a close personal friend of mine, and he's also grown on me in recent years. When he hits the battle zone, return a card from your mana zone to your hand. Naturally very valuable in control or late game based builds, because there are a lot of high cost cards that you play which you cannot use in the early turns of the game. Another cool use for Thrash Crawler is that he's able to keep cards safe. Like, there's more hand destruction in competitive Duel Masters than mana destruction, so you can just charge something if you're afraid it's going to get discarded, and then you can grab them back with Thrash later. Moving on to the spells now, we have one Crystal Memory, which is a I'm personally a big fan of this card. 4 mana shield trigger. Search your deck for anything. You will notice it does not read. You have to show it to your opponent, and that is because you can grab anything. That's kind of funny. We've also got 2 Energy Stream. Draw 2 cards. 3 mana. Very simple. However, with Essence Elf, it only costs 2 mana to play. That's pretty cool. We also have 2 Holy Awe. A bit strange that we aren't seeing 4 Holy Awe here, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So 6 mana, shield trigger, really just a shield trigger. Tap all your opponent's creatures in the battle zone. We've also got 2 Lost Soul for that discard in the late game. I think this is going to be a common trend. Any sort of deck with darkness that we examine, we're probably going to see 2 copies of Lost Soul. We've got 4 Mana Nexus. Add a card from your mana zone to your shields face down. So that's there to save your butt. Great synergy with Holy Awe. And we've also got 4 Terror Pits. Destroy one of your opponent's creatures. Interestingly, curiously, and commendably, this guy does not play any natural snare. If it were me, I probably would have gotten baited. I would have been like, ooh, shield trigger. I'm going to put that in. But this guy probably saw that Terror Pit fulfilled the same niche, and there wasn't really a need for him to have both, especially because having both and costing 6 mana each could result in some pretty clunky opening hands. So props to him for identifying that super duper early. So we're just going to scroll down and take a look at some of the more relevant stats. Okay, these are pretty useless, the ones at the bottom. It's really just the 2 at the top, so distribution by civ and distribution by cost that we're interested in. As we can see here, similar to the previous deck profile that I did with the double geyser, one of the civilizations is severely lacking, and that is the light section. 6 out of 48 cards really isn't a lot in my opinion, and well, needless to say, there are changes that I would like to make. Now, before I get into the changes, though, I kind of just want to understand how this deck works. At first glance, you think it's a control deck, right? Because you're like, well, he's got Lost Soul, well, he's got some discard in the form of Locomotiver, field control in the form of the bounce guys, Aqua Surfer and Corile, and he's got blockers to carry him into the late game and stop himself from getting rushed. But the thing is, if you're playing a lot of if you're playing stuff like Propeller Mutant, that to me suggests you're trying to apply some early game pressure. Aqua Hulkus and Bronze Arm, you can't really make a comment on that. But he also plays more low-cost cards like Essence Elf. So I'm kind of confused as to what this deck really wants to be. Now, the best way I can describe it is he probably wants to apply some early game pressure using the low-cost cards like Aqua Hulkus, Propeller Mutant. Those guys are good for card advantage, but he wants to be able to sustain himself in the late game with all the late game disruption like Lost Soul, Terror Pit, and then Cryptic Totem is an alternate win condition. For me, I'm not so much a fan of that super adaptable strategy. I would rather just pick a lane and then do my best to make the deck work as consistently as possible. But this guy won a tournament, so what do I know? Now, what I would do is, well, the first change I would make is I would probably scrap the light section entirely, or I would at least scrap the Emerald Grass entirely. So what I would do is I would probably replace all of the Emerald Grass with 4 Bloody Skeeto. You could put in Hunterfish, but the water section's already looking pretty chunky, so we could probably replace them with some Bloody Skeetos if you want that early game blocking. And for Holy Awe, well, naturally I would need to do some testing, but if I felt like Holy Awe as a card added sufficient value, I would just play 4 Holy Awe as the only light civ that I play. So the thing, now you might be thinking, oh well Jason, didn't you just go off on that other guy for playing such a thin darkness section and he played 4 Terror Pits? Yes, that is true, but I think there's a very key distinction to be made here between Holy Awe and Terror Pit or any other power shield trigger card. So the thing with Holy Awe is that whenever your opponent breaks into it, that's always going to buy you a turn, so that's always going to be valuable. You take complete control over the board with Holy Awe, And, Holiaw probably wins more games than Terrapit. Wins and loses more games than Terrapit, in fact. Terrapit, is a card that your opponent can play around. Like, imagine this situation. You just dump Holiaw into your shields with Mana Nexus. There's really no way your opponent can play around that. Like, they might try to, like, blow up your board. They might try to, control your hand. But there isn't really any order of operations that they can do to stop themselves from, from, like, losing a turn when they break into Holiaw. Whereas with Terrapit, you sort of have that order of operations dynamic where they'll be like, okay, well, I'll just break with this guy. I'll break with Emerald and I'll sack him to the Terrapit, or whatever the case may be. And then, you get set back. So I think Holiaw is a lot more impactful as a 4-off shield trigger. So that's why I can justify its inclusion. Also, if you're going to play a nature, water, darkness control deck, because you don't have any of those like mass field control spells that fire has, like Burst Shot or Searing Wave, I think Holiaw is a decent alternative too. So enough about that. What else are we looking at? What else would I like to change? As much as it pains me to say, I would probably scrap the Merfolk engine entirely. The Merfolk entirely. 4 Merfolk is really like not going to be supported that well by 4 Coral in my opinion, especially since they cost the same. Like if Coral costed maybe like 3 or 4, maybe things would be different, but they both cost 5 mana, right? So not a big fan of that. Alternatively, I could also kind of scrap the Aqua Surfers for more emeralds, so I could take out like the 2 Aqua Surfers and like 1 Merfolk for 3 emerald or something to that effect, or just play like 3 Coral, 3 Merfolk and 4 emerald. That could help too, especially with putting in Holiaw on the shields. So yeah, but anyway, you guys already know a lot about the Merfolk engine. If I were to go an alternate route, I might just replace the Merfolks entirely, max out on Aqua Hulkus and max out on Energy Stream. It seems pretty reasonable to me in terms of card advantage. I still think these cards are pretty good. They're not 3 cards, but they're still pretty useful. And also, Energy Stream has good synergy with Essence Elf. So with Essence Elf on the board, you're playing Energy Stream for only 2 mana. And actually, if you've got 2 Essence Elves out, you're drawing 2 cards for 1 mana with Energy Stream. That's pretty insane. So I might actually go that route, and I might play 4 Essence Elf instead. Who knows? The last major change that I would do is I would either scrap Cryptic Totem entirely, or I would include 1 or 2 more copies of him, so we would play 2 or 3 in total. I don't know, like personally, regardless of the card game that I play, like whether it's Pokemon, whether it's Duel Masters, I am just not a big fan of one-offs. I feel like you're not really gonna get it when you need it, and then in the odd times that you do, if your opponent has a workaround for it, then it's pretty pointless. Like, we don't even play any creature retrieval in this deck. There's no Dark Reversal, there's no Corpse Charger, so if they get rid of Cryptic Totem, it's like, what was the point of that? I just wasted 6 mana. So I might play another copy of Cryptic Totem or 2. Perhaps I could replace the Propeller Mutants. I would forego the early game aggression strategy in favor of just setting up for a big win with Cryptic Totem. And yeah, I think like in my own personal testing, I was trying to build a water, nature, darkness deck, which revolved around abusing the Merfolk engine and setting up for a big Cryptic Totem play, especially because, Merfolks they're pretty beefy, so they're not the easiest cards to get rid of, and, drawing a lot of cards with them will allow me to find Cryptic Totem a lot more easily, and that synergy with Bronze Arm Tribe, But yeah, it just never came into fruition. I think it was probably too similar to the other decks that we play, and we wanted a bit more variety in our own testing circle. But I digress. So that is the England national first place deck of 2005 by Lamal. It's a pretty interesting deck. I haven't really seen this combination a lot, but I think it's a pretty interesting deck, and I think with a few tweaks, it is something that I think would hold up. Very interesting card choices by him, a lot of which I don't agree with, but some of which I do. But yeah, that sums things up. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I hope you enjoyed and I hope you learned something new. And as always, I look forward to bringing you another video in the future. See you later.